That's what I was trying. If I keep people raising their hands, they would actually pay attention, even though they don't understand most people.
Great.
All right.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker is Charlie Burns.
See if you can tell what kind of person I'm describing when I quote from the New York Times from October 19th in an article described, or titled, "Revealed, the officer behind the skinny tie." He is slim, with a shaggy hairstyle, cool nerd eyeglasses, and an ironic smile. His wardrobe usually includes cardigan sweaters, glasses, and skinny ties to go along with his skinny trousers.
Hipster.
Yep, that's right, he's a hipster. Hipsters are part of our culture today, but they're also an embodiment of a philosophical ideal called postmodernity. Postmodernity was a term that came about in 1979 from a French philosopher called Jean-Francis Lyotard. He wrote a book called The Postmodern Condition. It's important to us today because it's the stage of thought or the philosophical cycle that we're in, and it explains a lot about how we view the world and also about how our society in general views the world. My purpose here today is to give a brief outline of postmodernity's important aspects by using the hipster as an example. I'll begin with definitions of what postmodernity and a hipster is, and then I'll move on to explain 3 different aspects of postmodernity. To begin with, what exactly is postmodernity? Merriam-Webster has 2 different definitions. The first one is that which comes after modernity. The second is any of the various movements of modernity that are typically characterized by a relation to traditional materials and forms, or by ironic self-reference and absurdity. Now, that last part, ironic self-reference and absurdity, is come into play a lot when we're talking about hipsters, so keep it in mind. Merriam-Webster also had a definition for what made up a hipster, but it was too nice. Most people have a derogatory view of what a hipster is. So in order to find a definition, I went to a Time magazine article. In 2009, Dan Fletcher wrote an article called A Brief History of the Hipster. He says, critics have described the loosely defined group as smug, full of contradictions, and ultimately the dead end of Western civilization. He goes on to give more descriptions of what hipsters are. The friends who sneer at you when you cope to like in Coldplay. They're the people who wear t-shirts silk screened with quotes from movies you never heard of, and the only ones in America who still think Pabst Blue Ribbon is a good beer. They wear cowboy hats and berets, and they think Kanye West stole their sunglasses. Everything about them is exactingly contrived to give up the vibe that they just don't care. To sum up Mr. Fletcher, it's irony. To sum up these definitions, postmodernity is a move to ironic self-reference and traditional materials, and hipsters are an embodiment of that irony. So, what is postmodernity saying? Postmodernity, like I said before, means after modernity. Modernism was a rebellion. It came into play. It started questioning everything. Postmodernity is the rebellion on the rebellion. Postmodernity questions the questioning. Now, this difference is really slight, but it's really important, so I'm going to repeat it. Modernity questioned everything. Postmodernity questioned the questioning of everything. Now, let's move on to some important aspects of postmodernity. I'm going to be paraphrasing here from the Purdue University English Theory Postmodernity website. And we're only going to be talking about 3. These 3 are extreme self-reflection, irony, and going retro. Let's take a closer look at these, starting with extreme self-reflection. Our current time today, people are very self-respective, and that's relatively recent. In modernity, people were self-respective, but it was more in high art, something intellectuals and crazy artists were doing. In postmodernity, it's really come down. People in high art, low art, and everyday life are doing it. You can see it in pulp culture in shows like 30 Rock or Family Guy, where people, all the characters, are very obsessed with themselves and just really interested in what they're doing. One of the most important aspects of postmodernity is that this extreme self-reflection and the questioning of the questioning is absurd, and so it leads to what our second point is, irony. Just like hipsters. A New York University student and radio host, Rachel Kranz, says in the New York University radio blog, Youth Radio, maybe the defining trait of hipsters is not how skinny their jeans are, but their very disdain for other hipsters. She goes on to list a bunch of hipster things. Sarcasm, vintage clothes, funny glasses, nostalgia for a different time, and ends, interesting enough, okay, maybe I just described myself. But you'll never hear me admit it, much less call myself the H word. This shows an important part of postmodernity. The irony of a hipster is that everyone can point them out, but yet no one is one. As Krantz wrote in her blog, hipsters have a nostalgia for a different time, and this brings us to our third point, going retro. Postmodernity is a play of history. It takes ideas that have come in the past out of context, which is absurd, but it's also a way of reflecting. You can see this same thing with hipsters. In their self-reflective style, they'll take 80 trends or old grandma sweaters, and they'll bring them out of context. This accomplishes two things. Like I said before, it's a form of irony. It also shows a desire for something that's no longer available. In postmodernity, there's nothing new. It's all a play of the past. And for hipsters, the very thing they want to have, they can no longer have. It's the only thing they can't have. You can't go back in time. You can't see Bob Dylan play live. It's all nostalgia. In conclusion, postmodernity hipsters are part of our times. Postmodernity can be seen in extreme self-reflection, ironic attitudes, and retro desires. And all of these attributes are embodied in the cultural phenomenon known as the hipster. Yeah?
Have you watched the show Portlandia?
No.
Oh, if you get a chance, go onto YouTube and look it up. It is pretty funny. It's like the old, you just need to go watch it. But it makes fun of like Portland and the hipster people and everything. It's just totally makes fun at hipsters. So
yeah, there's a lot of stuff about hipsters, and the more I like looked at it, like it was almost like matching up exactly for points of postmodernity. So yeah, it was really interesting.
That's cool.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Where does the term hipster come from? Like, is it just a derivative of hippie?
Oh, actually, I know that. It came from 1925 was the first known usage of it, which it means it came before postmodernity. It was originally describing people, like the Merriam-Webster definition is like people who are like extremely open to new ideas, like in like jazz or like a different way of life. So originally, like when they were, excuse me. Originally, when they were using it in, like before, it was just kind of like, oh, he's a hipster, like he's really into jazz, or oh, they're like really hip, they're into it. And one guy also said that hipsters were like the first ones with Jack Kerouac and things like that, who I just think is like super cool, not like derogatory. But the terms definitely like come to mean like this person who just like, they think they're above the trends, but they're actually, you know, just part of it, which is the irony, and I think they realize it. So it's like this phenomenon is like really interesting. Like the hipsters are actually saying something brilliant. It's just like the reason they're saying something brilliant is because it's so stupid what they're saying. But that in itself is showing where society is. So it's just like it's great.
I think you described the hipster in that complex pretty well. I think that's what Portland kind of is, right? That's what we're known for. Keep Portland weird. So.
Do you think you're a hipster?
Yeah, well, when because like I didn't know about hipsters. I came from a conservative background. I went to Europe for a while, and I came back, and people were like, oh, hipsters. And so I was like, oh, I'm a hipster. But that's the thing, like, if I say I'm a hipster, I can't be one, because to be a hipster, you have to deny you're a hipster. So if I say yes, then I'm not a hipster. So I don't know how to answer that question.
Just say no.
No, I'm not a hipster.
Then
No.
Then we'll know that you're
But I want to be. I think we need to redeem the phrase. Anything else? All right, thank you.